Hey there everyone, I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here. And finally, we get to talk about Metroid Dread, which just recently released on the Nintendo Switch. I've been waiting for this bad boy for quite a while. And if you've been following the channel, you know I've been playing all the other different Metroid games in preparations for this. But now it comes time to finally ask the question, does Metroid Dread live up to the hype? If patience was a virtue, then Metroid fans would be some of the most virtuous gamers on the planet. It's been a long time since we've seen a 2D-styled adventure for the galaxy's most infamous bounty hunter, Samus Aran. But finally, we have a new chapter in the Metroid series after the previous game for the Game Boy Advance, thanks to the peeps over at Mercury Steam. It's about time, too. Metroid Dread for the Nintendo Switch takes place shortly after the events of Metroid Fusion. Samus Aran continues to work with the Galactic Federation, which calls upon her to investigate a planet known as ZDR. A mysterious video is sent to the Federation that shows the resurgence of the X-Parasite, which was believed to be eradicated by Samus in the previous game. Because of this, the Galactic Federation sends in a team to investigate, along with 7 research robots called Emmy to assess the situation. Unfortunately, they lose contact with the team and ask Samus to find out what's going on. What happens there will take Metroid fans on a wild ride that builds up the mythos of the franchise and introduces some very interesting new elements. Samus explores planet ZDR and crosses paths with some classically inspired enemies and incredibly vicious boss fights. But above everything else, the atmosphere of Metroid Dread feels authentic to the series and brings together the entire experience into one very well put together package. So without getting into any specific spoilers, I will say that the story of Metroid Dread is really good with advancing forward the lore of the Metroid franchise. If you've been with the series for a long time, you're really gonna like this. I mean, there's some big revelations in here that are really going to get you talking if you've been following all the different lore and other pieces of info about the Metroid universe for quite a while. There's some big things in here that I don't want to spoil because when you do finally learn them, they're very shocking and they're very freaking awesome. In addition to that, one thing I can talk about that isn't really a spoiler is that we get to see a Chozo in here. When he actually talks, it's not in English, it's in the Chozo language. And then we actually see Samus, when she finally speaks in very rare form, she also talks in the Chozo language, which I appreciate. It's something different, but is also appropriate for the universe and appropriate for the lore, because, I mean, we do get to see Samus talk in other games, and she talks in English, and that's totally fine. But this one was different, and it felt appropriate, and I really appreciated that. But because I don't want to get too much into spoilers, let's just jump right into gameplay, because there's a whole lot more to talk about with that as opposed to just the story stuff, which I feel like you should discover that on your own when you finally play this game. But let's talk about the gameplay, because there is a lot to unpack, both good and a little bit of bad. The absolute best thing about Metroid Dread's gameplay is the controls. It just feels so good to move around and shoot enemies. As you gain new abilities and upgrades, everything works so smoothly. Switching between beam attacks and missiles on the fly during heated fights is great, wall jumping is a little easier to do than in previous games, and quickly using multiple abilities to reach new areas is very snappy. Besides that, the map that you have is very detailed. My only nitpick is that there's no specific markers for your objectives, which is a bummer because it was super helpful in the previous games. You might get lost a few times not knowing where to go next, so it would have been great to have on hand. It's a small nitpick though, because you could feel your way around and figure out what to do next as you traverse planet ZDR. Other than that and the overabundance of info on your map, exploring each of the game's multiple areas is very well done and will resonate with longtime Metroid fans. Now, a few things I need to comment on that may surprise you. Let's talk about the boss fights and the overall difficulty of the game. Like others have mentioned before, Metroid Dread is a lot tougher than the previous entries of the series. Boss fights have that traditional build up to them, and they sometimes act like a little puzzle when figuring out how to bring them down. But what makes them super tough is how much damage you take while fighting them. Regardless of how many energy tanks you have, you're going to take a beating if you get hit, and it can be super unforgiving. Learning the patterns of each fight isn't all that bad, but the damage output will make them feel a lot more intimidating than what they actually are. And finally, the biggest addition to this game are the Emmy encounters. These will either be hit or miss for most people who end up playing Metroid Dread. The Emmy parts of the map will force you to go from exploring to straight up survivor mode as you sneak around the Emmy robots that are stalking the area. If you're spotted, you'll have to hightail it out of there or be killed instantly when the Emmy robot finds you. This could get real aggravating. I'm with everybody else in saying how these sections are tedious to deal with. However, as long as you're careful and move cautiously, you should be okay. But eventually, you're going to have to run away from the Emmy because they're going to find you eventually. I feel like these types of encounters are forced upon you in the later half of the game. You can't harm these things either with your normal weapons. Instead, you have to find the Omega Blaster energy upgrade nearby for Samus's arm cannon. This allows you to damage and eventually destroy the Emmy robots. This is much easier said than done, however, but it's definitely something you'll have to accomplish. Every Emmy that you destroy gives you new abilities that you'll need to get around. It took me more than a few tries to accomplish this each time I ran into these things, so don't feel discouraged if you find yourself constantly dying and retrying. These sections of the game were made to be imposing, even though I feel like they stand out completely from the rest of the experience. They definitely weren't lying when they said that these encounters put the feeling of dread right into you. So let me reiterate something just for a second. I don't think that the Emmy sections of the game are bad. They're not terrible by any stretch. They're just super annoying and can be very frustrating for some people. I feel like this is the one section of the game where people are either going to check out and just be done with it, or they're going to really persevere and try to get through this, because they're just that annoyingly difficult. They're not impossible, but just, again, annoying more than anything else. But that's not the part of the game that really got to me in my own experience. What really got frustrating and annoying to me was the final boss fight. To me, this was just the one thing that was like, ugh, I really kind of like squeezed my controller with frustration. Like, it's just that one little thing out of this amazing experience. I won't spoil any of the story stuff that's related to the final boss fight, but I will say that it's a multi-tiered boss fight where you have different sections or stages of the actual character you're fighting against. And while at first it's a little bit confusing trying to figure things out because there's not really a lot of tells that you can really pick up on, especially the first time that you play it. But as you go through the boss fight, it just gets very tedious, and the amount of damage that you take, I feel like it's just way too much. I feel like it just needed to be adjusted a little bit. I feel that way about most of the boss fights in Metroid Dread, but again, if you love a good challenge, this might kind of resonate with you. But for me, this is just the one section of my entire experience over like the 8 or so hours that really got to me. It's just, again, I'm thinking about it now, I just get annoyed by it. But again, I was able to get through this and get to the ending, thank God. It just goes to show you that everybody looks at difficulty within video games just a little bit differently, and no two types of games and two types of experiences are ever really truly going to be the same. So what's my final verdict on this? Can I recommend that you check out Metroid Dread for the Nintendo Switch? Yes, you definitely should play this when you can. Despite all of my criticisms on the difficulty and other parts that I mentioned, this Metroid game gets a lot of things right for both longtime fans and newcomers alike. If you've never played the previous games, Metroid Dread surprisingly brings you up to speed pretty efficiently and gets you right into the new stuff. The controls and the visuals are great, the atmosphere is superb, and the revelations within the story will shock you. If you've ever wanted to know why people love the Metroid series so much, Metroid Dread is definitely a good place to start. It's a must-play for those who own a Nintendo Switch and will fit very nicely within your game collection. And there you go, everyone. Those are my thoughts about Metroid Dread for the Nintendo Switch. I personally believe that this lived up to the hype. I think that Mercury Steam actually did a very good job with what they had to work with. I know that the story goes that they originally wanted to remake Metroid Fusion, which I would have been totally cool with, you guys could still do that, but I'm happy with what we got here. Granted, my little frustrations aside, but this is still a good game. I think this is a must-play for anybody that owns a Nintendo Switch or just loves really good Nintendo first-party games. But regardless though, like any other game that I review on this channel, that's just my personal opinion about Metroid Dread. Let me know your own thoughts about this game down below in the comments section. Tell me, are you a big Metroid fan? Do you love Samus Aran? Did you have a real struggle going through Metroid Dread? Do you think like certain things were just too difficult or too easy? Did you like the exploration? Talk to me about any of this stuff down below in the comments section, and tell me also some of your other favorite Metroidvania style games. It could be Castlevania, it could be an indie game, it could be whatever else. Put all that stuff down below in the comments section. Thank you very much everyone for watching this video. I appreciate your support and all your good vibes as always. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon too to support my channel for new videos each week. You could also join my Patreon for early access to brand new videos and other exclusive content. Don't forget to join my Discord server too and be part of the community I have over here. If you're into games, then you'll love interacting with all the great people who are part of it. Thanks again guys, peace out, and stay epic everybody.